Jason and Bill for quite a long time back. They are my good friends. Are you seeing my screen okay? My PowerPoint before I continue?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's good. I'll turn off my streaming now and I'll continue on the talk. Back over here, page down. Okay, got it. So I'm Udai. I work for a company called Akumina as CTO. So I primarily focused on the Microsoft Azure, Amazon, and Google. Since we are a product-based company, we sell the software as a service, platform as a service, and the perpetual license. So we have to work across multiple clouds. So that's our platform to make it work across multiple cloud, also called as cloud agnostic or cloud neutral. As Bill said, I also run the user group in New Hampshire, Nashville. We meet once a month. So here is the meetup, Nashville UG. If you've never been there, please visit and then sign up. And here is my little personal site. If you want to know more about me, you can visit there, udai.io. In today's agenda, we're going to talk about the Azure governance. So mainly in the part of management groups and role-based access, policies, and blueprints. Those are the four major areas that we're going to cover. And I'm hope by end of this presentation, you should be able to take the knowledge and play it right away in your work. So when it comes to Azure management, if you take on-prem, it's a central IT, right? Controls the governance. So no need to worry about. You always go to IT admin. He controls everything. It's centralized. But when it comes to a cloud, user have a direct access. So anybody can get access to anywhere. So that's the nature of the cloud. In order to control, the management comes into 6 different categories, right? So first thing is a configure. It can be an initial deployment or ongoing maintenance, or the automation to reduce the errors. And then if you want to repeat the same work, you do the automation kind of things. For the monitoring, you need to monitor all the healthiness of your system. Product is, you want to make sure the service is always running. Even it goes outage, there is a network error or power error. So, that comes, Microsoft provides a couple of tools, Azure Backup or the Azure Site Recovery. So they have, the protection is very important. And then the security, any threat against your application or resource hosted in the Azure. And of course, migrate. So you want to migrate your on-premises workload to a cloud. And then last but not least is a govern. So very important. So govern is mainly comes under the category of the people, process, action on the resources. We need to well control that. So that you define that who controls what, because in the cloud, everybody has the direct access. So we need to define that governance. That comes under the policy management, cost management, and we're going to apply who has the access to that by using the role-based access control. We will explore that. So now comes the management group. If you want to get into Azure, the first thing what you do is, you sign up for a subscription, right? So you get a subscription. Subscription is the logical group, logical boundaries of your workload between, your resource and then the workload. Right? It's a logical separation from one subscription to the other subscriptions. So management group. So subscription let you create a resource group, and then the resource groups can have one or more resources you define on it. But it is a logical boundaries between your account and workload. But when it comes to a management group, so it's a logical boundary on top of the subscriptions. If you're going to work on one subscription, you may not need a management group. But at any point of time, you think it's going to have more than one subscriptions, then the management group makes your life easy. In my work scenario, I have like 100 different subscriptions. We need to set the policies. We need to set the role-based access. We need to define what resource we're going to deploy to, who has the access, who has the read access, who has the write access, right? So for that, you're applying every single subscription. It's going to be painful. That's where the management groups comes into a picture, right? So subscription is the logical workload between account and account, and then the resources. Then the management groups comes on top of that. It's a logical group of subscriptions to maintain all those subscriptions. And then you can create 10,000 management groups on a single Active Directory. So it works on an individual Active Directory. So once you have the Active Directory, You can have a number of subscriptions. In this case, you can have 10,000 management groups. A management tree can support up to 6 levels. So sometimes you may not see the one layer. So for example, you have an internal subscription. In my demo, you have an internal subscription. In the internal, I want to call it as engineering, sales, and marketing. I have an external subscription. I want to call it as different use case scenario, maybe a US East, US West, and so on. Right, so we can, and that level, you can create a 6 level down, not more than that. This limits the root level. So what, according to the definitions, the root level is not excluded. You can go 5 levels down. So the root level is a 1, and then the 6 levels, and then the 6 levels. So altogether, it comes to 7 levels. So that's how the definition works. So you can define 6 sub levels to categorize your subscriptions, like taxonomize the subscriptions. Once you have the management group defined, then your subscription can only belongs to one management group. So if you have to move to another management group, you have to remove it and reassign it. A subscription at any given time can be part of one management group. And then the management group can have many children. That means that a management group have one or more subscriptions, but a subscription at any given time can belongs to one management group. Right? So that's what it says. All subscription management groups under a single hierarchy in each directory means that that's the definition of how the subscription management group works. They have to be part of the same Active Directory. You cannot nest across the Active Directory. So here is some example. So simple enterprise governance. So you have the management group over here. It's a corporate IT, and then you have next hierarchy called production and non-productions. In the productions, you have some subscriptions, and then the non-production, you have some subscriptions. In each subscription, you have a resource groups, and these resource groups, you have resources. Right? That's a simple governance. So in the management group wise, you have 2 layers. The top layer called as a corporate IT management group. Underneath, you have 2 more management group, production and non-production. Then every management group, then you have 1 or more subscriptions. And here is a little bit complex enterprise governance. So you have a business unit, that's a top level management group. And then you have a management group called geography, maybe US East, US West, or maybe Asia, or Europe. And then you have the environment, production and non-productions. In every region, you may have a production and non-productions. And every management group can have 1 or more subscriptions, and every subscriptions can have a resource groups. Under the resource group, we have resources, and so on. So that's the 2 examples of how the management group and subscription, the resources are assigned together. And they all have to be part of the same Active Directory. You cannot manage them across the Active Directory. So next, set in the definition. So we're going to have management group, and then we're going to see the role-based access control. The role-based access control is what defines who has access to what, right? So there is 2 categories. One is the RBAC security principles. Assign access to who is going to get the access. The access is going to be given to a user. User can have access. In the groups, you don't want to assign individual users. Then you define a security group and give them the access. This group can have a one layer of access. And then the service principle. The service principle, you go to Azure Active Directory, you define application. In that application, you define a scope. In that scope, you're going to say it's application scope or dedicated scope. You may need some application may need application scope, some might need a dedicated scope. In that scope, you're going to set the permissions. So that's called the service principle. You go to Active Directory, you define the principle, and then you give the access. The one good example is the management API. So you go to Azure Active Directory, you define application, you define a scope, and then you give them a permission to management endpoints. Then in your code, you can start using that, right? And then the managed identity is something that controlled by Microsoft. For example, you want to build a system to store some sensitive data. For example, credentials or any sensitive data or keys to encrypt it. You store them in the key vault, and you want your application to see the key vault. You don't want to put any service principal in between. So once you start assigning the service principal, the client ID and client secret, which is nothing but username and user password, right? Instead of you doing that, the Microsoft enables that managed identity so that your server or your application can directly query the key vault without you defining that client ID and client secret. So that's a managed identity. So created and managed by the Microsoft. Those are the 4 different categories that you can assign access to. Now, when it comes to the scope, so where you can assign that access? That access can be assigned to the management group levels. Once you assign that access to the management group level, all the subscription under the management group gets the same access. So if you maintain 100 different subscriptions, you have to remove some access. You don't have to work on all the 100 different subscriptions. Just to go to the management group, remove it, it's good to go. All the 100 subscriptions, inheriting that access control is going to apply instantly. Or you can apply to the subscription level. Sometimes you want to override it a little bit, so you can do that in a subscription level. Or if you are not using the management groups, you can go to the subscription and assign that access control. You can also assign to the resource groups level. So management group, subscription, or sometimes you can assign to the resource groups level and then the resources. So you can directly assign that access control to the resources. Right? If you have any question, feel free to stop me, or keep posting it. When it comes to role definitions, there are two categories: built-in roles and custom roles. There are hundreds of built-in roles, but you can, if that's not going to solve your problem, you can define the custom roles. Tonight, we're going to see how we can define the custom roles. So one example of built-in roles, the owners, contributors, and readers, mostly used roles. Owners is he gets a full access to all the resources. Contributor, he close to full access, but some limit with some limitations. And the reader, he only gets the read access. He cannot delete anything. He cannot see or create any resources and so on, right? But contributor role is good, but it has a little bit of negativeness. For example, the user you assign to a contributor role by default, built-in roles, he can also create resources. In my cases, if I give a contributor role to anybody, they keep creating the resources. They are not deleting it. I need to control them. You can create a role, but you want to do everything else. That's where I'm going to define the custom RBAC to control that access. Microsoft cannot provide every possible combination of those permissions. So they give you all the custom roles available in the system. You compose based on your requirement. And then you create a new custom roles, and then you assign that roles to either a management group or subscription or resource groups or resources. Now, here is the syntax, how you can do a custom roles. It's JSON file. It has a 4 category. One is the actions, what you can do. If you say star, you can do anything. And then no actions, you define what is not allowed, right? So actions, what is allowed, no actions, what is not allowed. In the actions, I say, you can do everything, but the not actions, I say, you cannot write. It means that you cannot create it. You cannot delete it. But what you can do, you can read, or they call it as other scope, whatever the possible non-scopes that not belongs to write and delete, you can perform that. And then the data actions, what is the data actions mean? You want to control it in a data level. For example, the containers, right? So you can give access to actions to create a storage account, or maybe not actions. But in the data level, you want to restrict that he can delete the container or he can read the container. That goes into a data action and no data actions. That's the data level. The good example is storage containers. But the storage itself gets into actions or not actions. The containers level get into a data actions or not data actions. And then when it comes to the assignable scopes, you define this RBAC or custom role, how you want to assign it. You can assign to a management groups, and then you tell what management group you're going to assign to, or you can assign to subscriptions, right? So if you want to assign to management groups, you can only have one management group defined over here. But if you want to assign to subscriptions, you can define one or more subscriptions, just a comma, keep adding it. That's an array. So you can keep add the subscription 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But if you want to assign to a management group, you can only assign one management group. But if you want to assign to another management group, you just have to duplicate it, rename it, and then deploy it again. That's how it works today with the Microsoft. And let's see why it went back. Here's a bunch of PowerShell command. You can perform all these in the portal, or you can also perform these on the PowerShell commands. The very basic commands, the new as role definition. You create a JSON file when you use the new as role definition, and that creates that role and the scope, given scope. If you want to update this definition, you use the set function. and then you read what is going to be the definition, and then you remove the definition. Very simple 4 command operations you can do that. All right, let's see some demo here. So look at here. So I defined the management groups, 4 management groups, and every management group, I have a lot of data. So if I look at tenant, I have a large number of tenants. In this demo, I'm going to use only internals because that has less sensitive data. So I have something called Akumina internals. In the internals, I have two management groups. One management group called engineering and another management group called sales. The engineering management groups, I have 2 different subscriptions, one called Akumina Engineering, another one called Enterprise Dev Test. So every time you create a subscription, if you are an EA customer, they allow you to create a Dev Test subscription, which gives you some discount on the computing resource. Not all the resource, on the license side of the computing resource, they give you some discount. So for this demo, I'm going to use this. I create a Akumina internals as the management group. Underneath, I have the engineering, and engineering, I have 2 things. Okay, so how to create a management group? You just click on the management group, and then you define the name and keep going on it. So let me go back to the tenant root, add management group. I'm going to say test management, and then I'm going to say test management. So here is the 2 things. The management group display name can be changed at any given time, but management group ID cannot be changed. So you have to give a right name that you want to, right? So the display name can be changed at any given time. Just create save, and it's going to create a new management group, and good to go. It should be ready in a few seconds. But you got it. So that's how it's going to create it. Now, when it comes to the role-based access, RBAC, role-based access control, there is a 2 way you can do it. As I said, you can this demo you can see the PowerShell, but I will show you how you can create in the portal. To create in the portal, you can create the rollback on the management group level. So in order to navigate the management group, you go to the management group, click on the details, and it shows over here. If you click on the access control, that's where you're going to apply the roles, right? So if you click on the add, it's not going to give you that. So if you want to really create the access control or you want to learn it, it has to be on the script level, on the subscription level. So I go back to the go back over here, and then I click one of the subscriptions here. And then I click on the access control, and then I see the custom role, right? This option wasn't there when you go to the management groups. So I click on the custom role, and then the permissions, and I go through this wizard, and then it gives you all the permissions that I want to. And for example, I want to do a virtual machine, right? So I type the virtual, it displays me Microsoft Compute. Let's pick anything we want here. Virtual machine. So Microsoft Compute. Let's take a web apps, right? And then it displays me. It should come. No permissions found. Okay, so and then you can select what permissions you want, right? So as I said, I'm not going to complete in this screen, so I can select maybe this read, this read. So one problem that I found here, they don't give you multiple options. They give you 4 categories. One is the read, other one is the write, mean that you can do anything you want, minus delete, right? And then the third one is the delete, the fourth one is the other. The other tied to a lot of little things like how you set the IP address restriction and so on. But there's not a lot of control over here. There is only a read, write, delete, and other. They only give you those 4 controls. So you're going to combine those 4 controls and create the role-based access and assign to a subscription resource groups or the management group levels, right? So I'm just picking randomly something, I say add, right? And then I go next. Goes JSON file, and then I see this, and then I can copy it, I can run it. Okay, so now if I finish this wizard, it's going to create a permissions for me. So instead of doing here, so this is one way you can learn it, how to find these actions because we don't know what is the name of these actions. So you come over here, click on the permissions, and then see all the available actions, pick the one that you want it, and then either you can finish creating here, but if you finish creating here, it's going to create another subscription, not on the management group. So you can copy this script and put them in a file and then run from the command line so it can assign directly to the management groups. So now I'm going back to my PowerShell script. I have this script already published in the Git portal. The link here, I'll show you the link at the end of the talk. You can download the samples. So now I'm going to use our RBAC demo. And then I have something called contributor read write, but this guy cannot delete it, right? So I have this over here. And then I set assigning scope to this one. So I'm going to say some name demo contributor, right? So I save it. I go back to my script and then I say demo contributor. And then this is my test group. I already created it. So I upload this definition. So if you go back to my management group here, I'm going to go here. Oh, sorry. Internals, engineering, details, access control, role assignments. I don't see any roles here, right? So these are the default roles that I have right now. So let me create some roles here. So demo, I have this group that can be assigned, and then I just run the definition, and then that's optional. Line number 6 is optional. So let me go and create this definition over here. Okay, so I got the demo contributor. So if we go back, I refresh it. Role assignments. I didn't assign the role. All I did was I created the custom role. So I go back to my roles, and then I look at the custom roles, and I just created a role, right? So now I'm going to assign it. So there is 2 ways I can assign it. I can go ahead and add here, and then add the role assignment, and then I can pick my role, demo contributor, right? And then I can pick the user that I want to give it to. I can do it that way. But instead of doing that, there's a lot more user it will display. But let me go ahead and do it in a PowerShell. So I hear role assignment. As I said, I put some group ID over here. We go back. So let me run from here through here. Right. So I now assigned some user. So if I go back and reload this screen, now I assigned this user. Okay. So now this user has the read-only access. Right. If I log in as him and then try to delete anything, I won't be able to delete it. Okay. So that's the purpose. Any questions so far? So now, since I assigned to an engineering subscription, I go back to the engineering management group. I go back to any subscription that belongs to this management group. In this case, go back, reverse. So if I go here and then look for my access control, role assignments, and then I assigned to engineering, right? Yeah, role assignments, refresh. You see here or here. Okay. If you don't see it, don't panic. Just reload it a few times, it'll display here. So this is by default assigned, and it tells you it's inherited from the management group. If I go and remove it, it's going to remove it over here. So all I did was I assigned on the management group. The management group had 2 subscriptions. They're both now inheriting. So if I go back to my another subscription, I'm going to see the same thing. So I go back over here and then look at my access control, role assignment. So this one over here. So I sent it to the management group. Okay. Any question before move on to the next topic? And if you want to delete it, of course, I want to delete it. So I go here and then remove this assignment. Oh, I didn't read that definition. Yeah. Okay, map to the role assignment. Remove AC role assignment. Yeah. Okay, so it's got that. Let's see why it's not doing it. The role assignment is going to be. Okay, it removed it. I don't know why it wasn't running before. I have no idea. So if I go back to my my engineering over here and look at the access control, role assignments, it's gone, right? And I can remove the definition. To remove the definition, I have to use this ID, role definition ID. I put it over here. My definition still will be here. We go back to the roles. Look at the custom, it's still there. I go back and run this command. It says yes. Good to go. So if we go back and refresh this, that's gone. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. I'll go on to you guys are there, right? I'm not checking what's going on. The next one is the policies. So policies is how you control the compliances on your resources, right? Sometimes you want to put some sort of naming convention or some sort of PCI, TSS compliance or any compliance that you wanted. That compliances and the policies can come from the built-in, just like a roles, or you can build your own custom policies, right? So Microsoft cannot provide every single possible combination. So they give you, this is what is available. You can bring them, mix and match, you can bring them. Okay, so it is declarative. You don't have to write any code, just like how we did a role-based access, RBAC. It's just a JSON file, one file called rule, other file called parameter. So you define the policy with the rule and parameter. You apply the policy again to the subscription or to the management group. Okay, and then the policy is going to be triggered. So it's composed mainly of the policy definition, assignment, and parameters. The definition comes as a rule, and then the assignment. And the assignment can be initiative, which is nothing but one or more policies, just like compliance. So you define your own compliances. For example, any resource that created, VM needs to start with the VM dash. Web app needs to start with the web app dash. Application insight should start with the APPI. It's a Microsoft recommended naming conventions. Then you can group them together as an initiative. So anybody going to create a resource of all those things to validate and prompt you, okay, this is not meeting the policy requirement, then they're going to fix it and to move forward. So those are the three components: policy definition, assignment, parameters. You can use the built-in policy or the custom policies. It always evaluates in real time. It's not, so if you, for example, if you put a naming convention, it's going to evaluate it when you create the resource. Or if you have something else policy, then it's going to evaluate it constantly. It always on, it runs, it evaluates every time. But there may be some latency, but it is always constantly running and checking against all the resources. And you can also trigger on-demand policy evaluations. That policy can be assigned to a management group, subscription, or the resource level. And you can also exclusion scope. For example, I don't want to apply this policy to a VM, or I don't want to apply this policy to this particular resource group. So in one use case, in my scenario, you have a resource group for the dev test version. And then that version has the dev test QA. For the dev, we don't want to apply any policy because the developers, they're going to play with it. So we can define exclude this particular resource. So it's not going to validate anything against that particular resource group or resources. And policy initiative, as I said in the beginning, instead of running a one policy at a time, you can create a group of policies and apply to a management group or a subscription or the resources. So every time you run it, it's going to evaluate all the policies defined in that initiative and then prompt you it's passed or failed. Okay. The remediation, some of the inbuilt policy have the remediation. For example, if you turn on the port 80, it will tell you that hey, it's recommended to turn off port 80. So if you use a web app, you turn on port 80, then it will recommend you. It's not a good idea. The TLS 1.2, it will tell you that some of the services is not compliant with the TLS. If you're not turning on the TLS 1.2, it will tell you TLS 1.2, and it will also give you an option that you can click on it and then go to the screen and fix it. It will fix it. Some of the built-in policy will fix it. Some of the built-in policy, they will provide you a documentation because they can fix everything. Few things are easy to fix, such as turning off the port or turning on some of the radio, some of the predefined options is easy to do it. But if there's anything beyond that level, they will provide you a documentation, follow this guide and fix it. So they will provide you a remediation step of most built-in policies that you can follow it, fix it. That eventually leads to your security score or compliance score in this case. Sorry, not security, compliance scores.
Udai.
Yeah.
There was John had a question. Do policies have more flexibility than on-prem policies?
What is the definition of on-prem policies?
John, you can unmute and just talk directly.
So basically, when you have your standard on-premises machines with Active Directory and things like that, when you set up a policy, it seems like when you have a cloud policy, you have more flexibility than on-prem.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. But cloud policies are way beyond than on-prem policies. As you said, Active Directory, right? And again, on-prem, you have to go through that central IT to define those policies, maybe a password resetting policy or password length policy. In this case, those things are there. They are controlled by Azure Active Directory. And what I'm talking here is that policies is some of those policies are inbuilt policies. Yes. All the policies in terms of Active Directory that you applied is available in the cloud. It's a plus. You have more on the resource side. It is more flexible when compared with on-premises. Answer to your question. Is that answer to your question?
So basically, it's like cloud policies or cloud policies plus, like you said.
Yeah, on-prem policies plus. So you can pretty much do every policies that you execute on the on-prem on the Active Directory level, or if you have some custom policy that tells that the user computer needs to have certain virus software installed. So those are the policies that you're defining on premises, right? And you can do similar things in the cloud, but the cloud has more policies, more flexibilities in terms of those resources, because in the cloud there's a lot of resources than on premises.
Okay, so basically, when you move onto the cloud, your whole ability to control things goes up way beyond anything you could do with your basic on-premises stuff, and you have so much more control.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. And they're mainly defined for the compliances, so you can bring any compliances that you want. You write a policy, you turn on the compliances. It is more flexible. Let's move on to the next one: policy effects and evaluation. So the policy is effect, right? What effect the policies has once you defined it. It's the append effect. What does that mean? You have a policy defined on certain area, but you want to turn on, one good example in the documentation is you want to turn on some IP or remove some IP restrictions. So for example, you have Cosmos DB or you have Azure storage, you want allow or deny certain IPs. That's the append, right? So, or you can even define a tag for an existing resource. If the certain resource is missing some tag, you can define it. But as for the documentation, it's not a recommended append effect to do a tagging, but append effect to do some actions such as restricting IP address or granting the IP address. Use modify to do those kind of operations, such as updating the tag or something like that. And audit, it's not going to throw any error, but it just audits. So if you go to the security center, you can see what is being audited. So you're trying to do something, for example, I'm just use a very simple example. VM name should start with the VM dash. So you can define a policy. If the VM name is not going to start with the VM dash, you deny it. So it's going to tell you, no, you can't create a virtual machine because the policy is not met. Instead of deny it, you can say audit. So it's going to say a VM created, which is violating this policy. So somebody can go and check at it. Okay, so the VM created because they're in the crunch time, they need to test something, they created it, but they violated a policy, that's okay. So you just let them audit. So you can see it over there still. And you can set up the notification or monitoring alert. Okay, somebody created a VM which is violating the certain policy, and this has been audited, so you will receive an email or any other notification, the notification you enabled, you can see it. Audit if not exist, for example, sometimes you depending on the some in the virtual machine world, you're looking for something to be installed on the VM, for example some agent, for example the anti-software agent or something like that. And if it's not exist, that's okay. Don't break it, but just audit if not exist, right? So it's going to continue on, but still going to audit it. So your monitoring system from the security center triggers in, sends you a notification. This is what happens. And denies, of course, you deny it, you can proceed any further. It fails, so there's a stop. Deploy if not exist. Comes to some sort of one good example in the documentation. They say I did not use it. The documentation they say, if you have a SQL server, you want to apply the transport certificate encryption, certificate for the encryption, then you can do that part of your policy, and that's going to deploy if not exist condition. Then you can execute those steps to do transport encryption to install a transport encryption certificate on the SQL server level. And then modify disabled means that you don't want to run the policy for a certain period of time. So you're running the policy, if somebody is in a test mode, you don't want to really cause trouble to that, or some policy is gone out of state. So you want to run certain kind of rules from 1st through a 15th, and then you want to turn it off, then that's where the disable comes in. Then you can disable it until next marketing time comes in or some other event happens. You can then go back and enable it. As we discussed, modify is mainly, for example of modify is to create, add or modify the tag and so on. Okay, so those are the some effect, not some, all the effect is supported. And how, now we have like 7 effects and how this has been executed in order, right? The first things when the policy triggered in, it checks is enabled or not. If it's disabled, no, it's not going to do anything. Done, the policy. The second effect is going to look at it. The second priority is going to look at it, append or modify, right? Because the deny can write something. That's why they check the append or modify, and that's the policy executed second. And then all the denied action executed, and then the audit action executed. Okay, so those are the order. First, disable to make sure whether we need to run or not. Then the append or modify, and then the deny, and then the audit. So now, how do you define the policy? It's very simple. Yeah.
Me again. John had another question, and the question is, can you set a policy where the policy's effect is to not allow costs to go above a certain level?
Exactly. You can set the policy. Yes. The answer is yes. You can turn off some of the resources. Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer your question, John?
The cost is part of the policies, and cost is also part of the governances, right? All governance is all about policies. Now, policies are required in order to control the cost. You don't want to lose money on it.
Right. Yep.
Can I step in for a second?
Sure.
So I've heard of so many places where they start using Azure and cost just runs rampant because clearly they don't understand reserve time policies and different cost models and things like that, and it gets too expensive. So I feel like if there's a policy where you can just go, you can run this until you run this amount of money, and then shut it down, and then you're not allowed, that would be a big help, but I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, I don't have a sample to show you, but it is existed. It is. I mean, I can do a follow up with you. We can get you some samples, but it is possible to control that cost using the policy.
I think one of the biggest thing I've noticed about Azure, there should be a specialty about finance management in Azure. So, but great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if they put, if they give us a first class tool, then everybody going to control the cost. And how come Microsoft makes the profit? So they want us to spend more money. Yeah, that's a good question. So let me move on to how you define the policies. The define the policy comes into two files. One is the rule, other one is the parameter. So you define the rule. The right hand side, God, I'm in the wrong order. Okay, policies. You define. There is a conditions if all of the conditions met. In this case, field type is going to be a virtual machine. Then the name pattern. If that does not match, not in this pattern, then you deny it. So this is where your effect going to come in. Deny, audit, append or modify or disable it, right? That's what comes in. And then the parameter file, you define the parameter. So if you use more than one parameter, you're going to keep defining the parameter on the parameter file. And how you execute it as very simple PowerShell command, new Azure policy definition. You can also do this in the portal, right? Or you can do it over here. So new policy definition, and then the assign policy definition. Good to go. Your policy in place. So for this demo, I'm going to use a very simple two policies. Let me go back to the portal again. So I go back to my management groups. So I'm right now in the management group called engineering. I go to the details, right? I have the policies. Okay. So here I can define a policy, but to define a policy, I'm going to duplicate this tab when it loads. So I look for the policies over here, policy over here, and then I can definitions. Okay, so which is not here. Oh, here it is. I didn't see it. Sorry. Definitions, and then policy definition, and then you keep adding it. So definition location. So which is going to be, in this case, because I'm browsing on the management group, so it tells me all the management group that I have it. So I can select the management group. For example, engineering. In this case, I say that's where this policy is going to be applied. And then I can define some name and then some description and then the policy rules. Again, it's a JSON file. Once I type the policy rule and then click save, the policy is saved. And then you assign it. And then once you assign it, it's in effect, right? So instead of doing the portal, I'm going to do it in the PowerShell command. So I go back to my demo called policies. I have the command over here, and then I have two policies. The one policy is called virtual machine. Okay, so this is the policy, VM name, and then I have another policy called web app, right? So this is important. So for web app, Microsoft.web/sites, and virtual machine, I call it as, come on, there it is. I have to make that a bit bigger here. Rules and roles. Okay, so we call it as Microsoft.compute/virtual machine. For web app, Microsoft.web.sites, right? And then the corresponding parameter file. So same parameter name pattern, and then and here I call it as name pattern, and I have PowerShell command that runs all the policies here, right? So for demo reason, I'm going to put demo here. Okay, so I defined the management group called engineering. That's where I'm going to apply it. And then that's a full scope, how it's going to be. Sometimes Microsoft needs a scope, sometimes not. And then policy definition, we need some name and then the display name as we seen on the UI and some description, and then the policy file, which is the rule, and then the parameter file, which is the parameter, and then the management group that I'm going to apply it. If you want to apply the policies to a subscription, it's going to say dash subscription. But in this talk, we're always going to use the management group. So I define the management group. And more is equal to, and I run this script. It creates a policy, and then here again I create another policy, which is the web app. So let me fix the rules of the web app. If I have anything hard coded here, parameter, so nothing hard coded, so it could be good to run. Save all. So I go back to my computer, policies, and then write the match pattern.ps1. I wouldn't believe when I run everything. Let me run one at a time. Let me run this. Before I run that, if I go back to my engineering and then the policies, right? When I look for the policy definitions, when I look for the custom type, I don't have anything. Okay, so I'm going to add a custom type. Let's run this command. Okay, so if I go back and then it was there, yeah. Okay, so I had some more hard coder. Makes sense. That's a get policy. That's not a problem. But and then I ran the what is the command that failed? Okay, created it. I just go run this command now. It should run it. Yeah, and then I just go look at it over here. I refresh it. Okay, I got my VM naming policy, right? Where is it assigned? I can look at the assignments. No, it's not assigned. When I look at it over here and the policy, it's not assigned yet. So I'm going to assign it right now. Okay, so that's a statement you can assign, but I'm going to hold the assignment statement for now to demo other functionality. So let me create another policy here. So run these two. Okay, so we go back to the definitions and then look for the custom type, refresh few times. Is there, it'll come, but it takes. Sometimes it takes a bit longer. Okay, did everything correct. Yeah, it is there. Okay, so I have two policies. Now, how I can assign it? I go back here. It's going to display me. Come on, load it. Okay, so I go back here. I select the custom. I can do that. Right click and then assign. So you can view definition, edit definition, duplicate, anything that we want to do it. Now, if you want to assign it, I say right click and then assign it. And then it tells me what scope you want to apply it, right? In this case, if you want to change the scope, I can define it, but right now the policy under this management group, so it can be assigned to that management group or underneath, okay? And then exclusion scope, as I said, if you look at it, optionally choose. I don't want to, it displays me based on the subscription. That scope is the management group called engineering. Underneath, I only have a 2 subscription. Tells you I don't want to apply to this subscription really because this is something going to break, so I can exclude it. Or as you select, I can exclude the resource group. So for example, if I say this one. And then it will tell you which resource group you want to filter it or not filter it, and so on, right? And then you give us some assignment, a name to it, and then enabled it or disabled it to run the policy, and then you just review and create. Once you click on this and then go to the next step, and it gives you the name pattern. Because if you remember correctly, here in the policy we had a 1 parameter. So if you look at it. Rules here. So we had a 1 parameter. In that parameter, we have this parameter file. That's the parameter file is prompted over here. Now you define the pattern. This is not supporting a regular expression. Right now, it supports the 3 characters, question mark, asterisk, or cash. for numbers. Okay, those are the three things. So I heard that from Microsoft, they're working on the regular expressions, but it is not there yet. So you can use one combination of those patterns. Okay, so if I want to say everything started with a VM and I don't care after that what it comes in, so I say star. So VM dash star means, you know, I'm expecting one or more character after the dash, but it doesn't matter what it is. So I want some numbers to be there, then I put this way. So I'm expecting VM dash in some characters, one or more characters, then dash, and I'm expecting the number. That's how I put the patterns. Okay. So I can complete and create this, but I'm going to cancel it for now. So that's once I assign a policy. So if I did not assign it, but that's how you assign individual policies. You click on it, assign it, and then click on it, assign it. So where it's going to effectively work, I will show in a second. So that's the way that you assign an individual policy. But there is something called initiative definition. What does that mean? You want to create a compliance standard, right? So you have it's a naming standard. So right now in my naming standard, if any resource that creates a VM, this has to be VM dash, web app, this has to be app dash. So I can create an initiative definition. Instead of assigning one at a time, I can create an initiative definition and come back here. It's going to load all my custom policies, says a custom, says a custom. I'm going to select that policy. I'm going to select that policy. And then I'm going to say my my naming compliance, naming compliances. I say that, and then I click save, right? So what I'm doing is the initiative is nothing but grouping one or more policies. Instead of assigning the single, individual policy, you group them together. This also let you pick all the built-in policies. So you can mix and match. There's a crazy number of built-in policies. You can go through it and then choose the one you want to. If they're not going to meet your requirement, obviously you can define one like this. So I'm going to save this one. Okay, so now it prompted me. So if you looked at it before, when I click right-click assign, there is a parameter tab that comes with the same text box. You're going to define it. But in this case, it's an initiative. Now, when you build the initiative, we have to assign the parameter. So I'm going to say for the first one is the virtual machine. I'm going to say VM dash star. And then the second one is the web app. I'm going to say app dash star. Okay, and then I click save. Now I created the initiatives. So if we go back to my initiative definitions, sorry, assignments, and then assign initiative, right? Initiative definitions, and I have my initiative definitions. So before, when you assign a policy, you right click on the policy, click assign. But here, how to assign an initiative, you go back to the assign initiative. Now I'm assigning to the management group engineering. I select my compliances, which is custom initiative that we created. We're going to assign the scope of engineering, and we are not going to exclude anything. Okay, so that's the name we gave it, and it's created by, and then go to the next step. There is nothing to define the parameter, and then the next step, if you have a remediation, that this is where it gives you. You don't have, if you don't give up, you can provide a remediation steps. Either it's a self-cleaning, or if you use the built-in policies such as checking for the transport standard or the encryption, it will give you automatically the remediation steps over here. But in this case, we don't have any remediations. I go to the final step, and then there is no error. All right, and then go and create. So I created an initiative that contains two policies. Now what is next? Now we need to see how it's working, right? So we applied this policy to a management group called engineering. So what does that mean? If I go back to the subscription underneath, I'm trying to create a resource, then this policy should be in effect. So I'm going to go back to the engineering subscriptions, go back. I think I can go here. I try to create a VM, for example. What is do that? Let's do create a resource. Say let's see web app. Go compute virtual machine. All right. So I want to change to engineering. That's where we applied it, and then it does not matter what I'm going to give it here. Or I just say demo by Udai, something like that, so I can delete it later. Virtual machine name, so I'm going to violate it. I'm going to say demo Boston, something like that. I'm not going to worry about any of these, and I always use Windows, so let me use Windows here. I just say some user, password. All right. And then when I go review and create, it's running the final validation, and it said it failed. When I looked at it, it failed on the naming convention, right? So now if you look at it, what it failed to tell you. So, okay, this definitely failed on that one. So if I look at it, open a new tab, it provided me, okay, this is the convention. You want to change it? Yeah, you can now review and click and provide, save and change it. If this is not an expected behavior, yeah, here you come and change it. But now how do I fix it? I go back to my previous screen, which is a basic screen. I go and say VM dash, hello Boston, right? And then now I go review and create. It's running the policy rules now, running the validation. It still failed. I've seen this. Sometimes it will take a time when you apply the policies. Keep trying on it. Trust me, it'll work. I'm going to go back to my screen. Previous, basic, close. All right. So what we did was let's remove the dash, VM dash, review and create. Okay. It may be the initiative, sometimes it's not understanding, but it will work. Sometimes it does that weirdness, but it will work. The logic will work. If I go back and unassign the initiative, let me go back here. Me delete assignment. Yes, I delete the assignment. Then I come back to the definition, and then I look for the custom. And then that's the initiative. I didn't assign it, so I didn't worry about it. Let me assign this one. Virtual machine. Okay, assignment value, that's fine. Review and create parameters. I'm going to say VM dash star review and create. It's applied to engineering now. Okay, it's assigned. We go to the assignments. You look for policies. That's assignment. Okay, review and create. Go back to custom. And assign it, right? Yeah, and assign it. Policy. That's what I did. Yeah, it is over there. It just takes a time. It's over there. Let me go ahead and do a same operation over here, just in case it is passed to basic review and create. It still failed. VM dash hello person. Okay. I did a request disallowed by the policy. Okay, it brought the right policy, but trust me, this is how it's supposed to work, and that's how my other policies are working on my other subscription. But at times it has a problem, or if you come back in a few minutes later, it may work too. You will try it end of the demo, right? So that's how you run the policy. Yeah, that's how you run the policy. Any questions so far?
Can I jump in? So I've noticed with Azure, a lot of times, if things don't work, you just need to stop, give a little bit of time, let things catch up, and then they work.
That is true till today. Yeah, I mean, we have that problem every day.
It's funny because normally with on-premise, you can go so fast, but in the cloud, you have to stop, you have to wait, let let things think and catch up. You just have to be patient.
It's not all the time, but sometimes this is the problem when you try to reuse the same identity. In the work that I perform, we rapidly clean up because we don't want to pay for it, right? And then we rapidly rebuild it. When that happens, it fails. This is the case. For example, in the index services like search in Azure Search or cognitive search, they call it as now. We want to create the index, delete the index more often, and then rebuild the index when we're trying to reuse that investment. So we don't want to create another index service.
Yep.
When we use the same name, we have this problem. So like 1 out of 3 times, it brings the stale data from the last time I created. Then none of the indexer will run and then bring the data and so on. And I had the same problem with the Cosmos DB when it was trying to send all the changes to my backend function app. It will not do it if I go and delete and recreate that. And even though I enumerate the data, but it depends what you're doing it. In my experience, I've seen this is more often it's happening when you try to reuse the same operation over the existing service, same name identifier over the existing service. It happens.
But I think the bigger thing I'm getting at is when you have all your resources on-prem and everything like that, you can control the resources and you know what the workloads and everything like that is. And when it's in the cloud, on one day, there can be low utilization across the cloud, so everything happens right now. And other days there's high utilization, so you have to give it a little bit, and then it works.
Yeah, true. I think Bill, you can answer better this question, but I will try my take. There's something called auto scaling. Microsoft has auto scaling on every single component they build. It can be a serverless, it can be a compute, or it can be a database. For the database, they provide auto scaling request unit. Compute, they're providing auto scaling from scale out, not the scale up or down. You should be able to scale out. 1 to 2 to 3 machine, or back to 1 machine, or web app 1 instance to n instance, or back to 1 instance, right? When it comes to the database,
we all want it right now.
Yeah, there is a problems, but I worked a lot in the on-premises in the past, but when compared with the on-premises, the cloud seems to be much better. I know there is a problems, but that problems is not always happening, but it is happening here and there, right? It is there. It's inconvenient sometimes, but I believe, facing the upfront investment on-premises, working with stale hardware, but these problems, face the problems once in a while is okay, seems to me. Even another example, if you take a database, they provide you auto scaling of these request units. You can provision for 100,000 unit, but there is a base unit you want to set it. For example, 4,000 request unit, and it's going to scale automatically. But doing that in the on-premises, almost impossible. Bill, you want to add something? That'll be great, but I will move on.
I'll make one minor comment. That Azure is, I got to think it's one of the most complex, sophisticated, high-scale systems, ever created. There are other, AWS is a big complex system. Azure, that's and there are some others, but it's got to be in the top 1% of, boy, this is a big, large, complex distributed system, right? And it happens to run our workloads, but also the Azure workloads, and it has an eventual consistency model where when you apply a policy or you create a new policy or make an assignment, there's it captures the request to do that, and then it's got some tidying up to do in the background, and that can take milliseconds or seconds or maybe sometimes minutes on the outside. I think that's just a natural consequence of building complex systems, is that you let them settle sometimes. I don't know. Do you have the same? So that's my thumb to the wind idea of what I would imagine would be a hard problem to make that not be to solve that in a way that everything was instant and worked all the time. It'd be a lot more expensive, and it'd be more risk paths, right? If you have to wait for everything to settle before the UI gave control back, for example. Do you experience that you work across the 3 clouds, Udai? Is this a phenomenon that you see?
I don't think you want to hear this answer, but the cleaning up the resource, the reusability mode, there is a little lackness in the Microsoft compared with the AWS, but it's not something that you cannot accept it. I accept it all the time. I understand. Okay, I understand things are going on. I told you a good example when we reuse the same index, we had this problem 1 out of 3 times, right? So we go back, you see the index is deleted. Yeah, index deleted, index deleted, data source deleted. But where is that? You few seconds later, you run the new index. Few seconds later, you have a stale data over there. Where it's coming from? I know it's crazy. It's coming from. If I would have waited 10 more minutes, it's cleaned, because they work in a partitions across multiple hundreds and thousands of machines, and sometimes randomly you see this problem if you don't give enough time to cool down. When compared to the other provider, there is, but there may be a problem with the other provider too, based on the area that I consumed. A little chatty here, but it's not bothering me, to be honest. It's bothered somebody in my lab, but it's not bothering me.
And Udai, can I ask something?
Sure.
A couple days ago, I had a meetup, and the person was more versed with AWS and Google Cloud. And he was talking about, I could get this wrong because I'm still working on my cloud, the CDI pipeline. And he's talking about all the different steps and components and all this to get it to work on Azure. And AWS. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going, it seems like all this is just built into Azure and it's easier. Am I wrong?
It is easier. Yeah. I mean, Microsoft is a software company. It is easier. Yeah.
So it's like Azure, you put the parts together, but with Azure, it's all there.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was just crazy, but thank you.
Yeah, it is there. It is easy. Compare with the, it also depends what type of resource you're consuming it, right? If you go back, and Jason might be the right person to talk about it. If you go back, a year back, if you want to manage containers, Azure might not be providing the right tools, but if you go back now, Microsoft provides awesome tools to manage those things, right? It's always evolving, but Microsoft goal is to, I'm not a Microsoft person, but I believe Microsoft always brings the awesome tool sets to make a developer's life easy. But it just takes a time, but eventually the end game, you will see awesome tools.
Yeah, just to add it to one more thing there, actually, with the Microsoft, right? So if you have any on-prem licenses or something like that, Microsoft let you use those on-prem licenses for the resources which you are provisioning in cloud. Let's say you have Windows Server licenses or anything which the company might have already bought and they're using for on-prem, and now they decided to move to cloud. They might think like, oh, what happens to my licenses which I purchased upfront? No, they can use it. That's what they called as a hub. So you can use those licenses, and that saves like some good cost for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, they have enterprise cloud test, which gives you some discount on the resource consumptions.
Can I add in? So sure. If you have a on-site SQL license, you bring that up to Azure, and then you use the reserved instances. Your cost drops astronomically. It becomes almost cheap.
Yeah. But those license only applies to the enterprise subscriptions, not the dev test subscriptions. So but that's still a good amount of money to save. Actually, that's a good savings.
Okay, so I think okay, good. Thank you. May I know your name? Sorry, I'm not seeing the entire dashboard.
Sorry, this is Vamsi. My name is.
Okay, nice to meet you. Okay, good point. Thank you. So now I had a two policy, right? So so I had one policy for VM, one policy for web app. I'm not sure how I configured, but now I start applying the web app policy. So if I don't have a app star, then it's going to fail. So I say something like this, and then I say, it says yes, yeah, looks a valid name, and then review and create. What? It was failing a few seconds ago. Now it says passing. That's the one thing I don't understand. It was failing a few seconds ago. Or I don't know. All right, it was displaying, it failed the validations until I put an app dash. But anyway, we got it. Let's move on. Let's move on to the blueprints. That was great questions. Thank you. Let's move on to the blueprints. So now you have the management group, how to create control the subscriptions, right? Now you have the policies. How do you want to define the compliance? To control the subscription, you have the role-based access control. You define who belongs to what group and how you want to give them access on the resource level. Then you have a policy, the people who have access to the resource, how they can meet the compliances. That's why you have the policy. So you have the management group, you put a subscriptions, then you define who has what access using the role-based access control, to what resource. And then you define the policies. How do you want to define the compliances when they're going to access the resources, right? Now, how they can deploy all the resources together, or how they can integrate all the policies you just learned, how they can integrate all the role-based that you learned, and how they can deploy the resources. So what you defined, it makes sense, right? That's something called blueprints. The blueprints is composed of resource groups, ARM template, policy assignments, and then the role assignments. Once you have the blueprint defined and assigned to a subscription or to a management group, then all the subscription under the management groups, you can deploy all the subscription under the management groups. So this is very important. So if you have, if you repeat certain type of deployment for all the customers, so I'll give one example in my scenario. So we run a managed customers who want to have their own subscriptions. We run a software as a service where we onboard our subscription. They take a software as a service model. So when we run the managed customers, we will provision a new subscription, we will manage it, but they are going to be deployed the same exact pattern, right? So for example, we create a web app, we create a Redis instance, we create a Cosmos DB, we create a search index, key vault, storage, everything we created. So now that's a repeated steps. The one way, we have the PowerShell published on the online. You can, before the blueprint, you can go ahead and download the PowerShell script and run it. It's good to go. With the blueprint, you don't have to run it. You can make all those predefined templates available in the portal, right? So blueprint is composed of mostly the ARM template. If you already know how to use ARM template, blueprint is nothing new, zero learning. It's exactly, just copy everything in the ARM template, put them in the blueprint, create a JSON file, put them everything in there is a few tags before and after. You define those few tags and just copy the ARM template content and put it over here. That's all it is. All right. And it's a declarative. It follows some patterns, like a convention patterns called artifact. And then you put all the artifact inside, we will see in a second. Right. And that apply to a management group or subscriptions. You can pass a parameter. So you define all the parameter in the blueprint template and pass it across to all the ARM templates. In other words, artifact. It can have a policy or initiatives. You can, one difference between ARM template and the blueprint is ARM template, you can store it somewhere as a storage, but they are not giving you workflow on it, meaning that you can you cannot apply version authorization. For example, you create one today and you want to modify and convert that as a V2, you can do it with the blueprint, but not with the ARM template. You will have to maintain it somewhere else, but the blueprint versioning is natively maintained within the cloud. It can be a static parameter or it can be a dynamic parameter, meaning that a template is executed, that output can be passed to a template B. Then that output can be passed down to a template C. Right, so that's how the dynamic parameter works. You can define the sequencing. By default, it's go from top to bottom, but you can change the sequencing by putting the depends on. So you have 3 templates, storage, key vault, and web app. You want to create a web app right after the storage, and you're going to say the web app template depend on the storage. So it's going to wait until the storage is created, right? And then the resource logging. Resource logging is you deploy using the blueprint, and you don't want somebody else to delete it. They want to keep running it. That's the most dangerous things. When we run the managed customer instances, we don't want anybody to delete it accidentally. So to do that, there is an option called locking, so nobody can delete it until the resource owner goes and unlocks it and delete it. Okay. Now, how to create a blueprint? It comes with 2 files. One is the blueprint.json. There you define all the parameters, right? The second artifact, the template is nothing but a copy of currently whatever ARM template that you are using. You have an ARM template to create a web app, just copy and paste here. You have an ARM template for key vault, just copy and paste over there, right? So any ARM template you use today, just copy and paste over there. And then you just decorate with these tags, resource group, parameters, and so on. So if you look at it over here, here is the resource group demo. That demo should match with the resource group demo over here. And you dynamically replace the parameters. It will give you an option to replace it, but that's how it works. And then the parameter website, right? That parameter is coming from this parameter. So whatever parameter you defined over here, you can read that parameter over here. And if you want to read output of this file parameter into some other file, you're just going to say whatever the template name of parameters of the parameter name. We will see an example. Okay, and then the type is important. So just 2 files. One is the blueprint.json to define your parameter. Second one is the artifact, which is nothing but the ARM template with some more parameters on it. And it takes a convention-based pattern, and this is how it convention. So blueprint.json, then you create a folder called artifacts, and then you define the artifact 1, maybe the key vault, artifact 2, maybe the storage, artifact 3, maybe the web app, and so on. I'm not sure what's the time now. Bill, do you have are we okay? We still have time. So blueprints.
Yeah, I think we have the room for another half hour or 45 minutes.
Again, thank you, Bill. So here
there are no rooms. That's a virtual meeting joke. Come on.
So if you look at the blueprint PowerShell, there is mainly 2 blueprint commands, right? One is import. You can import it, and then the path, and then you give the scope. And then other one is publish. So if you import, it creates a draft until you publish it, right? So you define the template, you import it, it creates a draft, and you do again, it makes changes, and it's going to overwrite it. So you import it, you publish it, but again, you go and import the same template, it will ask you, okay, you want to overwrite it, and that'll become a second draft, and you can publish that as a different version. Okay, so you can have multiple versions. So this is a more, if you compare with the ARM template, you need to version it somewhere else. ARM template is not going to tell you how the resources are provisioned. Okay, but here it will tell you how the resources are provisioned, which version is coming from, all those cool things. You can do it also in the demo. So let's go back to the demo. I'll close this one. I come back here. If I look at it, blueprint.json, I have I'm creating a 3 resource here. One is the key vault, other one is search service, and then the third one is the storage, and fourth one is the web app. Right. So I'm creating 4 services, and they are this. If you have ARM template, this is what it look like ARM template. And now I just added the few tag, not that's Microsoft required you to add those 2 tags before and after. Okay. So let's take a blueprint.json first. It has the parameter. The parameter is going to be a website name, and storage account name, storage account type. And you can define, if you want the allowed values, you can define it over here. And then the key vault name, and then some object ID who has access to that key vault. And this is again some user ID who has access to the key vault. And permissions, I hard code it to all, but it up to the whoever defining that blueprint.json, right? So just a key take here, you can define the parameters, you can define the allowed values, you can set the default values. In this case, I set the default values, I set the allowed values, right? So that's all you do, blueprint.json. And then one thing to note down in the bottom, resource group. That's very important. And we have to refer this name into all the artifact that we define. So let's take a keyword.json, and we have the parameter, it's multiple parameters here. Just go scroll up, keyword, right? Keyword name, object ID, user ID. Where it's coming from? This is all coming from the blueprint.json. Where we set that value, if you look at in the bottom, we say the resource group demo. So we said that should match what is in the blueprint.json. Once you have it, we say that it goes to the blueprint.json, it reads that template and set the value here. Okay, and then it keeps setting all the values from there. And if you look at it over here, secret value, it's setting from the output. So how you read the output? It sets the output from the storage, which is the storage, just uses the name. Here is the storage. Okay, go back to the artifact storage, read the outputs, and then read that value. So that's going to be secret value for this template. So it's reading the value from the storage artifact, but it cannot run first. So what we do here, we say that depends on the okay, so we create the storage connection string that depends on the keyword. So we need to create the keyword so that we set the value secrets. Okay, I'm sorry, storage here. So this, go back, depends on. So there is no dependency on the storage. So this is going to create first. Okay, so now when you go back to the keyword depends on, this secret depends on the storage connection string. It depends on this keyword name. So, and then if you look at it over here, the secret value comes from the storage. So it's going to execute that storage first and then take the value assigned back to this storage connection string over here. And then all the other parameters. Okay, so now go back to the web app. If you look at the depends on over here, should have some depends on. It depends on the website. And then the resource ID, app service plan name. So you first needs to create a plan. It's the same. I mean, again, this depends on applied to ARM template. If you have ARM template, if you already used a depend on, that's the same thing used to here. But it knows when you use the output parameter like that or here, it knows this is not the first thing to run because this has the dependency parameter on storage. So it'll go and look at the storage. Okay. And then it'll execute the storage first, then it takes this one. That does some analysis. Microsoft runs some rules to see what to run first. If you don't, if you don't have any dependency, it's going to go in the order of top to bottom. All right. So now how to deploy this? So I go back to my blueprint.file. So there is one thing to note, you need to have the blueprint registration happening. So you go to the, that registration should happen on the subscription level. You go to the subscription. So if you look at it over here, home, subscription, and then look at the resource providers, and you need to enable it. Okay, if not done already, you need to come back. There may be a lot of things. You click on it and then register it. So you have to find the blueprint one. I already did it, but you find the blueprint one and then enable it. Do that, and then you just have the file and some name, and I'm going to run from the root of the folder. Okay, and then run this command. So you can, I'm running it under the management group called engineering. I run this one. Go back to my management groups. Engineering, right? Details. Okay, no, it's not part of that. It's part of the blueprints. Okay, blueprints. Okay, blueprint definition. I don't have anything. I don't have any assigned blueprints here, right? So let me go ahead and look at it. So I'm going to run this one. Oh God, I broke it. The name I broke it. And we delete it. Okay, let me delete it. Go back. And the my blueprint, so if I look at it, if I refresh this time now, I see it, and then I can publish from here. Or I can publish this command. If I, it doesn't matter where I do it, but let me do it from here. And then I call it as the, I didn't read the my blueprint. Okay, so I published it now. But if I want to create another version, I can go back and run the same command, assuming that I edited something, right? I click on it. It's going to ask me, I'm going to overwrite it as a draft version. Yeah, you do it. Okay. Right now I'm going to read the blueprint again. I got it, and then now I'm going to publish it, and this time I'm going to call it a 2.0. I'll show you where it appears. Okay, so I did a 2 version. One is the 1.0, second one is 2.0. I didn't make change, but you assume that you changed something. Okay, so now I have the blueprint. So when I refresh it, it's the same blueprint, but it has a multiple versions. If you want to see, you can look at it. View blueprint. The latest is 2.0, but when you deploy, you can go back and then see the 1.0. So this is the artifact. This is the things. Now let's assign this blueprint. So we can assign it. Okay, so when I assign it, asking me the subscription. Again, I assign to the management group called engineering. Under engineering, there is only 2 subscriptions. So it prompt where do you want to apply it. So if you want to apply the same deployment across all the subscription, you will select everything. So when you do a deployment, it's going to do it for all the subscription. In this case, I'm going to go only enterprise dev test. Okay, and the location, you can choose anything I want. And here it displays which version you want to display. If I want to go back to 1.0 deployment, I can select 1.0. And here is the option you want to lock it or not. And then here is the system assigned or user assigned identity. But user assigned identity, you have to go and pick up Azure Active Directory app ID. System assigned identity, Microsoft will do it for you by using the inbuilt service principles. So now our template had these kind of params. Again, if you don't, you have the resource group name. So I'm going to say for easy purpose, Udai Boston demo. I'm going to copy that value all the time. I'm going to pick the location over here, set the value. I set wrong value here. I'll show you why it's going to break down the road. I set that one. Account type, and again, we said this is a predefined value, so you can define it. And then website name, and then assign. Okay, now, okay, so service name, and then assign. Right, so it's going to assign it, meaning that it's now deployment in progress. So you have the blueprint, deploying to one subscription. You just assigning it. So if you go back over there, you can see the status, what is going on over here. So it may tell you it's deploying it. In a few seconds later, it will say deploying it, and it's going to fail because one of the parameter I punched in wrong. That's the key thing of this. When you go ahead and resume that, it will skip all the successful step that it ran already, right? So you have 10 artifacts in your blueprint, 5 artifacts succeeded, the 6th artifact somehow it broken. Now you go and fix the parameter, you rerun it, it's not going to run the first 5 successful artifacts. It will check it, but it's going to skip it. For us, it's skipping it. For the system, I'm not sure what it's doing it, but it's not going to run those 5. It goes to the 6th step where it's failed, it's going to continue from there on. And you can see all those things when it's running. But this will take some time to trigger in over here, but you can see all the activity logs. That's how the blueprint works. Any question? It's coming up. Yeah, it's deploying now, but soon if you go back to my subscription here, enterprise dev test, sorry, enterprise dev test resource group. I'll come. It's just not happy today. Any question? Okay.
Yeah,
So
one question popped up, Udai. So you're running some scripts in, using some various resources along the way that you're running from the command line. Are those posted to GitHub or anything like that, for example, for access by the public?
Yes, I will get you the URL. So yes, the answer is yes. I'll get in a second. So now look at it. It failed. What it does is it created the resource group. It created the storage. Then it failed. I go back and look at why it's failed. Okay, something failed. Keyword. I had a bad parameter over there. Okay, what is a bad parameter? When I want to set an access policy, I give some blob of text. But access policy cannot set to a blob of text. It has to be a GUID that existed in the Active Directory. So I don't want to browse my Active Directory in front of everybody. So I already copied some value for the demo purpose. So if I go back to my RBAC command, I have this over here. Okay. So now I go back to my, so it did 2 resource created successfully. The third one, it failed. I go update assignment, right? And then I go and fix the parameter. So this is the parameter I purposefully did wrong. Okay. And then I assign it. It takes time, and now it will resume and complete everything. So if you see like a few minutes later, it will create all those things, and we can refresh this over here, and it will display. So the storage is created. It will come back sometime. Okay. So now answer to Bill's question. Yeah, I do have Sam Bill's over here. All the code that I ran, you can download from here. Is that what?
Thank you very much, Udai. We'll capture that URL and post it into the chat for folks to have easy access to.
Yeah. So I go to the last slide. Yeah, that's the references link that I learned from. Hopefully, it can help you too. Any question at this point? So if I go back to my assignment, it's still waiting. Yeah, it's deploying, but it will succeed this time. And the resource is ready. If you look back the resources, they are locked. So if you go back to, so for example, we'll go here. If you look at the locks, it is locked. I don't know whether I set a lock or not, but if you look at the resources, it should be locked by default. And see, it maybe apply and end up thing, but yeah, it will be locked. You cannot delete it. But I am the super user, but somebody else comes in, they cannot delete it. Yes, I think that completes my talk tonight. If any questions, I will take it.
Yeah, Udai, I was wondering if, let's see how to phrase this. So if I'm just getting started, and maybe I have some older Azure production workloads, and I want to say start using management groups or policies or blueprints even, but more focused on the first two, say. Should I just go in and make up policies from the ground up, or are there example policies that I can reference and learn from, and maybe copy as a starting point?
Yeah, there is example policies. So if you go to subscriptions, so go back to the home. Click on the policies here. And then if you go to the definitions, there's a lot of examples. So policy definition, so import sample from the GitHub. There's a lot over here. You can, that helps you to define a custom. First, you're going to define what policy you want. From there, you're going to check it's a built-in policy solves the problem. So if you know there is a built-in policy that can solve your problem, you can import all the built-in policies into your management group or a subscription. If not, then you define custom policies.
And does it happen to be an equivalent pre-existing set of resources for like how one might model a management group or a management group hierarchy? Like, is there guidance on this?
No, management group, if you look at this, if you want to define management group on your org, you will, there's no guide on it, but you will have to define your own hierarchy based on that. In my hierarchy, it's very simple. I have the tenants, where my customers, I have the internals, where I have the engineering and sales, engineering and something else, and I have the another one called sales. I only have three management group on a top level, and one of the management group has a two sub levels. But here is the example. This link tells you how you can define the governance on the management group.
Is it okay if I pitch in there? Is it fine?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I just want to say like how we did for our organization. So in this way, it will give some idea for other people. That's the reason why I want to talk. So what we did is like in our organization, there is like sub departments, like you take like a sales department, or like some manufacturing department, and then some other departments, right? So we assign like subscriptions to those groups, to those departments, and then we went to the management group and we defined those departments. And inside that departments, again, we created like non-prod, prod, and load subscriptions, and then we assigned those. In this way, what eventually happened for us is like we know how much subscriptions are, how much it is getting cost for each subscription, and we know under which it is falling. It is falling under finance, or it is falling under sales or something. That helps us to say like, hey, sales is consuming 50K per annum. I think next year, okay, let's increase it to 10%. So for budgeting purposes and everything, it really helped. So it's that hierarchy, like how we are seeing here, that geography. I think instead of geography, I think we changed it to departments there. So.
Yeah, just to add some more note, in my case, we started 6 years ago. There was no billing per resource group at that point in time, right? So we were adopting the EA billing. We were depending on the EA billing. Now you can build pretty much a resource group to a resource. You can see it. So you can, instead of creating like every subscription per customer, you can have one subscription, and then you have multiple resource group, one resource group per customer, and so on, as Vamsi said. Since we started 6 years ago, we had to rely on the EA model. So we manage the billings per subscriptions per customers, but that's the alternative way. But if you would have started today, I may be using a one subscription with the resource group, or maybe some subscriptions, not a one, but maybe few subscriptions, but not today. We have like 85 subscriptions. That's not something we wanted to have. That was a good example. Thank you, Vamsi.
Yeah, thank you. And I have one more question, Udai, but I'm going to pause and see if anybody else in the audience has a question, and they're welcome to certainly go ahead of me. What are your questions, folks, on blueprints, management groups, policies, governance?
Can I just ask, I guess it might be a follow-up question, because back in the day, IT was seen as a black hole because it was money in and nothing out. And then a few places started chargeback models. And once that started happening, IT was profitable. And now I thought if you could tie a subscription to each department, then you could recoup and send the cost where it needs to be. But can you do that kind of recouping under a single subscription?
Yeah, you can do that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, right now the billing is, you can bring down all the way to a resource. So you can see the building cost per resource, and then it's grouped by resource group, which is your department. But your department may have more resource group, then you can combine it. Go ahead.
But can you do the billing on the sub level?
Right, we can do that. There is a concept called tagging is available in the Microsoft. Microsoft introduced a tagging. So what we can do is, like, let's assume right now you have only one subscription, and every department provisioned all the resources inside that subscription without following any naming convention. Okay, let's assume that is your worst case scenario. Okay. So what you can do is one of your engineering team can write a simple code and take each resource. Before doing that, maybe they have to identify like which resource belongs to whom. Like, let's say resource 1 belongs to team 1 and resource 2 belongs to team 2, department 2, whatever it is. So there is a tagging concept involved. So they can write a small script and then get that information and then tag it to that resource. So
and do some billing.
Right.
Oh.
And then use the Power BI or anything, and then group the resources by tag. So then you know like which guy goes to whom and who is accountable for.
Oh. Yep. Good. Thank you.
Yep. The tagging is a very powerful system when it comes to anything in this case. As he said, you can group all the cost by tag. And you can define a policy to make sure everybody defining the tag for the resource.
Yeah, we can do that too.
All right.
Are there further questions?
Come again, sorry.
I was asking the audience if there were further questions. If there aren't now, I'll throw in my last question. When you're starting with management groups and policies, they're pretty powerful. Do you have a recommendation on how fast to jump in? Like, would you recommend jumping in audit mode, or turn on more aggressive policies right away? What's your experience on the right way to kind of ease into it?
It depends how the existing, how many resources you have in the existing system. It turns out that it's not a bad idea to go aggressive. It's, people adapt to it very fast. Audit mode is not going to solve anything unless you pay attention to that, right? You have to go to a security center and then watch all those things. If you really want to know, there's going to be a problem. I think you have to be a little aggressive on deny mode. Few policies, it's okay to have audit mode. For example, disk encryption. If you do a lot of VM, it's okay to have audit mode. That's an inbuilt policy does too. But I would say not go everything audit, then it doesn't make sense for you to roll in the policy. But you will have some in a required mode. You have to force certain things. Yeah.
Sure thing. Right. You're not going to make any progress unless you.
Yeah. If you do audit, nobody's going to follow the standard. Just like
the voice of experience there. Well, it sounds like that's a wrap, Udai. Huge thank you, enlightening talk as always, and really want to thank the really engaged audience as well. It really brings a lot more to the conversation when we have a lot of back and forth like we did tonight. So appreciate everybody's willingness to speak up, and it was great to have the little bit of a round table going here.
Thank you for having Bill tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome, Udai, and I look forward to having you back again many times.
Sure.
I'll share with the audience that on Tuesday, that's September 1st, is the next scheduled talk, which interestingly I believe is 100% focused on blueprints. So it'll be a more I'm guessing a slightly more in-depth version of a subset of Udai's talk. So if you want to drill into that and get a different perspective, tune in on Tuesday. This session will be posted usually within a day or two to the YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you just Google or search for Boston Azure, you'll find the YouTube channel. There are, I think, 8 videos there now. This will be number 9. And if folks have suggestions for us, we'd like to hear them. You can tweet at us. You can post in this message before you leave, and you can post to our BA Slack, bit.ly/BA Slack channel. Join that and have a chat where we'd love to hear the feedback. You can also post on Meetup. But we love to hear the feedback, and we were always interested in your ideas for talks. There was some chatter about talk ideas tonight too. That was productive. So
Bill, Udai, and everyone else, thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All Udai tonight.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.